hope you didn't think that the season 2 trailer was the only episode that I'd be releasing today. I was originally going to wait until next week to release this beautiful piece of story medicine, but then thought no, I have to get Amalya's words out right away. So today, in the first birth story of season 2 for the Freebirthing in Color movement, you'll be listening to Amalya's journey into the motherhood of 2 daughters over a 12-year transformational span of time. Amalya, a half Javanese woman, started her journey into motherhood when she was 24 years old. Living the lifestyle of a traveler and jewellery maker in India, she met a man and fell pregnant soon after. Cutting her travels short, Amalya and the baby's father traveled back to Australia, where she then entered the mainstream model of medical midwifery care. Amalya's birth of her first daughter was pretty straightforward and didn't include huge accounts of trauma, although there were some unfortunate experiences when she was unceremoniously jabbed with Pitocin and had her placenta forcefully removed from her body, which also left a piece stuck inside her for a week. After the birth of her first child, going back to living the traveling lifestyle and navigating a rocky relationship, Amalya made the choice to do things differently. This led her on an intense and heart-opening journey of finding herself again, listening to her intuitive knowing, and tapping back into her internal compass to then be able to open herself up to hold another child within her womb. This is such a big story with many parts to it, so I will let Amalya share in her own words how she went on the journey of a lifetime in the 12 years between her 2 babies. Hello, Amalya. Welcome to the Freebirthing in Color movement. I'm very, very excited to have you here and very excited to have you share your stories.
I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for having me, Karma.
Yeah, no worries. Um, so you've just woken up and I'm just getting into my evening because of our time difference, but I
hmm
would love to just get right into our stories or
Yep.
into your stories, pardon, and just have you start with what is your ancestry and lineage that you are passing on to your children?
Okay, so I'm mixed blood. So I'm half Indonesian, Javanese, and half white Australian. So that's usually a blend of different sort of European ancestry with
Mm-hmm.
a small percentage of Japanese in there on
Oh,
my mother's side. Yeah.
wow.
But
Okay.
but what I'm really like more so passing down is the Indonesian Javanese heritage, which I really like to boost up for my daughter as well.
Mm. Okay. And is that on your
Mm,
maternal side or paternal side?
it's my paternal side.
Okay,
Yeah. hmm
cool. Oh, wow. That's interesting. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my daughter's father is half Filipino, so as
Okay.
well. So we're both mixed
Mm-hmm.
blood, but
Mm-hmm.
it's the Southeast Asian sort of
Mm-hmm.
aspect for us.
Cool. I love
Yeah,
that. That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
you're
Um,
welcome.
and with that, I would
hmm
love to ask you the next question. Where does your motherhood journey begin?
So my motherhood journey, I mean, it begins lifetimes ago, really.
Mhm.
But in this life, I became a mother when I fell pregnant when I was 24 years old, and then I gave birth on 2 days before my 25th birthday.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, and now I'm 37, so that was 12 years ago.
Mm,
And I've just had another baby
mm.
who I free birthed.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's where my journey begins 12 years ago. And it's been a huge sort of story for me to get to this point as well. Yeah.
Do you want to get into that then? So when you were
hmm
24 years old, like what was that
Yeah.
experience of, were you preparing for this pregnancy? Was it a surprise? What did you do when you first found out? Like, do you want to kind of go back into that energy that you were
Yeah.
feeling?
Okay. So when I first became pregnant, it was definitely not something I was planning. But I remember actually on my 16th birthday, my father, he gave me this gold ring with a small diamond in it. And on my 16th birthday, I put that ring on my finger. And I remember just having this kind of vision to myself that was sort of, I'm going to give this ring to my daughter on her 16th birthday.
Mm.
And I was 16 years old. I wasn't a very maternal sort of person as well in that point of time. I didn't grow up with my birth mother as well. So I grew up, my father raised me mainly.
Okay.
And so that's also a part of the story too. But yeah, so I always remembered that. And I knew when I was to fall pregnant, I was to keep the baby. And I
Mm.
just had that sort of intuitive kind of feeling throughout my life. And then
Mm.
when I was 23, I finished university and I just wanted to travel. And I went over to India with one of my friends. And um, I just had this calling, like a very deep calling to go to India. And I just had this feeling I'd die over there, which was I was a little bit of a, emo kind of girl in my early 20s. But I realized later it was actually kind of an identity sort of death when I was over there. And I met my daughter's father, who was a traveling artisan
Okay.
from South America. He's Argentinian. And when I met him, we sort of fell in love and we were living the hippie life. I was making jewellery, selling it on the street, and
Mm.
fell pregnant and in India. And I left my life, like I had a job before that, and I left that. I left my share house. I changed everything for this man, and then this baby came, and I knew, okay, I'm pregnant. I'm going to keep this baby because of that sort of intuitive hit I'd had earlier in life, and also I had this other feeling that because when I was 21, my dad had cancer, and my dad's quite a significant person to me, and
Mm.
he's the Indonesian one as well.
Mm.
And he had cancer, and I sort of, at that point, I was like, oh, if he dies now, he'll never know my children. And that was always something kind of weighed heavy on me.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I fell pregnant, I was like, I want to have this baby because what if my dad, what if he goes, has cancer, comes back and he passes? And I'd love him to know, or love my child or children to know my father.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kept the baby, even though I'd only known her father for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't the smartest decision, but it was a very heart-led sort of intuitive decision, which is the way I live my life.
Right.
And yeah, then I I panicked and I found out when I was in France, and I came back to Australia.
Okay.
And yeah, so
So then,
that's
sorry, I was just gonna say, so then what happened after that? So you weren't actually in India when you found out you were pregnant, but that's where you conceived. And then you had gone to
yes,
France and then found out you're pregnant there and then came
yeah.
straight home. So then what
Hmm.
was that experience like for you? Because when you said you got pregnant in India, I was thinking you had this like pregnancy in India as you're like going to temples and ashrams and things. So what was it like then coming back to Australia? Did you kind of just get right into the system or did you have alternative ideas of how you wanted to go through that pregnancy because you were already living that alternative lifestyle?
Yeah, so I was quite young and I was quite naive as well. And as an Australian too, I was quite naive to the world in many
Mhm.
ways. Like, we're quite we can be quite closed off to
Mm.
a lot of different ways of the world. And that's why I sort of fell in love with my daughter's father as well,
Mm.
who I'd never seen anybody living the life that he was living, traveling. He'd been traveling already for 12 years before me. It was his
Oh, wow.
lifestyle and
Okay.
making jewellery. And so that was quite a sort of like an eye opener. And he was like, we can travel, we can, sell the jewellery on the street, have the baby. He wanted me to go to Argentina.
Okay.
He wanted me to free birth, and he was kind of
Oh.
against. hospitals, and I was just sort of like, yeah, that is insane, that is crazy, like no way, like I don't know what I'm doing, all these kinds of things, which in retrospect I kind of agree with what he
Mm-hmm.
wanted for us and the baby, and to travel and with
Mm-hmm.
the baby. And I was just like, no way. And I panicked. And that's when we sort of separated. He went to Germany when because we were going to travel in Europe and make festivals. But when I found out I was pregnant, I panicked and I said, no, you can come to Australia. I'm going to have the baby in Australia. I think it's the best decision. And yeah, I came back to Australia and I went sort of, yes, I just followed the protocol, which
Mm-hmm.
was here. It was, go to the doctors, go to hospital, and to do all of those sort of things. And um, yeah, just I didn't have any friends that had babies then either. I had maybe one.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I didn't, there was no social media like there is now. So there was no awareness for me that, there was any other way to have a baby.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just like go to hospital and follow all of the sort of the protocol that they have in the medical system.
Right.
And that's what I sort of did. But I always had that because I do have that sort of spiritual alternative background. I did sort of think about, okay, well, I'll do yoga and I'll um, Google some hypnobirthing techniques, and I want
Mm-hmm.
to have a natural birth and all of that kind of thing.
Right. So did you have any, how do you say, like red flags or any questionings when you were going into the system to have your prenatal appointments? Were there any moments that kind of, now in retrospect, that kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuck out to you to be like, oh, this doesn't seem right? Or like, yeah, how am I, did you feel, yeah, like you were kind of losing your power? Did you feel like you were getting told to do things that you didn't necessarily want to do, but were told, quote unquote, you have to do this or you're not allowed to do that while you were in that system? Did any of that come up for you?
When you say that, I just immediately have this flash of me in going to the hospital for these prenatal appointments. I
Mm,
think after 20 weeks, and there were just so many women just
mm,
lining up,
mhm,
and it just felt so sterile. And I
mm,
remember that. And I'd just come from like traveling in India and all that kind of thing. So I was la la la. And I remember sort of almost skipping through
mhm,
past the women. And I remember them giving me these because I was probably much younger than most of them. And I remember them sort of almost giving me dirty looks as
mm,
I sort of was happily
mhm,
walking to my appointment and or totally in my own world. But I
mhm,
remember just sort of like, what's wrong with all these people? Why do they look so grumpy and unhappy? And it was just like everyone was like lined up to go into their appointment. And I just thought, I
mhm,
remember now in retrospect, I was probably having those thoughts of like, this doesn't seem right.
yeah.
But I was always living from that heart space
Mhm.
generally. So
Yeah.
luckily, I just knew in myself, like, just trust this part of the journey,
Mhm.
trust yourself, trust, that this is going to be the best thing and it's all going to unfold the best way for me. That's how I sort of lived my life at that
Mhm.
point. And luckily it did to some extent
Right.
while I was in the system.
Right.
But that was sort of more me playing with the universe or
Mhm.
in a way.
Yeah.
Not so it was gamble really.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you. And
Mm.
as you were having these prenatal appointments, I might have missed this, but were you working with an OB or were you working with a medical midwife?
I think I don't think I ever met an OB really, not from my
Okay.
recollection.
Okay. Cool.
Here it was just mostly midwife.
It's mostly medical
Um,
midwife there. Okay.
yeah, hmm
Okay. Cool.
yeah.
Cool. Then do you want to get kind of into closer to or yeah, closer to the end of your pregnancy journey and into the birth and how that started to shape
For
and
my
go for
first
you?
birth.
Yeah, for your first?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I ended up having a natural birth in terms of the most natural you could go while you're in the system. I did do some of the tests and some of the scans, but because I was young and um, there were low risks for me, there weren't many,
Mm.
luckily. And I sort of trusted the moment when I was in there and accept I had a long labor. So I
Mm.
went into birth. I went into early labor, I think, on a Friday night. And then I ended up birthing my first daughter on a Monday morning. So it was
Oh,
all
wow.
weekend. Yeah.
And were you in the
Um,
hospital all weekend, or did you have a long duration of starting your birth at home and then transferring?
yeah, I was laboring at home. And then my father and my stepmother, they sort of were kind of panicking for me, and I had no idea
Mm.
what I was doing. I was just
Mm.
following along with what everybody else told me to do. I wanted to stay at home a lot longer, but they were sort of like, no, 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 go to hospital, go to hospital. So I think I went to hospital either on the Friday night or the Saturday. No, the Saturday.
Mm.
And the midwives there sort of checked me and they said, no, go home, have a sleeping pill and see how you feel. And I just sort of went, okay. I
Mhm.
went home. I tried to sleep with a sleeping pill. I wouldn't take a sleeping pill now,
Mm.
whilst being pregnant. And that was the only medication that I took throughout the whole pregnancy. And then the next day it was sort of ramping up again. And went to hospital on the Sunday night when it was really, the contractions were getting really close. They do sort of tell you to stay home as
Mm.
much as possible back then.
Mhm.
And yeah, luckily I birthed in the time allowance that they sort of give you.
Yeah.
I don't know what would have happened if I went longer.
Mhm.
But I was blessed in a way because I would always pray during these sort of moments and I would always be like trusting my intuition and trusting that it was going to go the right way. And I was given this beautiful sort of delivery suite, which was they had a bath, they
Mm.
had dim lighting. The midwife I got, she just happened to be really on my side. And
Mhm.
she just looked at me and it's like she knew that I could do it myself. She sort of left me alone. She left the room and it was just me and my daughter's father at the time.
Mm.
And I just labored there. And then it got to a point where
Oh, I've lost sound, Amalia.
yeah.
Oh, there you go. You're back.
Okay.
Oh, now you're frozen. Are you there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. Can you see me?
Yeah. Can you see me?
I can see you. Yeah, there's just a little bit of a delay.
Yeah. I just turned my Wi-Fi off,
Okay.
and I'm on data now.
Okay,
Is
okay.
that okay?
Yeah, 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 that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that was just sort of a blessing, and like I said, it was a gamble, and I had a I asked. She told me to. She didn't really push any drugs or anything like that, which was amazing.
Mm.
And she told me just to get in the shower, and I got in the shower and I was fine. And then I pushed in the bathtub for a while, but she didn't. My baby didn't want to come out in the bathtub, and then I got up and I was walking from the bath to the bedroom, and she came out while I was walking
Oh,
from
wow.
room to room. Yeah, but I remember in that moment of giving birth to my first daughter when in my 20s, early 20s, that oh, okay, this is what it is. I know this is how it works. Like
Mm.
I don't need to be in hospital next time. Like in my mind, I sort of had that
Mm.
thought that I carried with me throughout the rest of until my last birth. That yeah, there's no, like, I didn't really need them. I did it
Mhm.
all by myself, and um, yeah, if I but that was a part of my process of understanding what I needed, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So you like
Mm.
just birthed your baby as you're walking back and forth. And then what
Mm.
was that kind of immediate experience like for you? Was it super like super gentle, super easy, or did it feel like the medical midwife that was there, did she get more kind of hands-on once your baby was born, or did she still just let you like that trust that you had felt she was giving you to birth your baby? Did she still kind of give that to you as you could like, bring your baby to your chest and assess you or and assess her and just kind of have the lead in that part of your birthing experience as well?
Yeah, so the midwife that I got, that was really, I felt that she was on my side and I
Mm.
connected with her. Shift finished.
Oh, okay.
So she had left just, I think, just before the baby was born.
Mm.
Um, Maybe a couple of hours. I think her shift finished around 3 a.m. and my
Mm.
daughter was born around 5. But I
Mm.
remember her coming in and she was saying, I've got to go now. But
Mm.
you've got this and all that kind of stuff. And, I was in my own world. So luckily she had kind of given me that help. She was kind of like an angel, but then the rest of the team and people that I got after that were a completely different kettle of
Mm.
fish.
Yeah.
And they were sort of more in that fear frequency and sort of, no, you've got to get out of the bath now. The heart rate is too high. And luckily, I think if I hadn't, because I was pushing for an hour, I if I hadn't have given birth, I think a whole lot of other interventions would have taken place. I
Mhm.
could feel that energy sort of coming because I'd already been birthing for a number of hours. I think it's 12 hours you get
Yeah, I
in
heard
the
that.
hospital. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I was sort of heading towards that time limit.
Okay.
And I could feel that pressure leading up. But luckily, I she came out as I was walking from room to room, and the midwife at that point, she sort of helped me. She kind of twisted my daughter or moved the shoulder or something like that, and then sort of said, you can take her out." And I panicked. I was like, "What do you mean take her out? Like, I'm gonna
Mm.
drop her." And no, take your baby. And I took my baby from out of me and I got to hold her. And I was in
Mm.
that kind of etheric sort of space and walked to the bed and was just in awe of my baby that had just come out of me and
Mm.
super high. And then I remember this other midwife, or I have no idea who it was, some nurse or something like that, sort of come up to me and was just like blah blah blah, but I don't really remember what she was saying. And then all
Mhm.
of a sudden she just like stabbed me in my leg with a needle,
Oh.
and yeah, to get my placenta going. And then I was just
Mm.
sort of like, I was high on all of the hormones of just giving birth, and then I didn't get to see my placenta. I didn't
Oh.
I didn't get told like anything about it, and just sort of that whole aspect of the placenta was just removed from my experience,
Yeah.
which was something I really felt sad about.
Mhm.
And it wasn't really informed consent either, because how can you ask for the
Mhm.
consent when
Yeah.
you're high as a kite, essentially.
Yeah.
So that was really disappointing.
Yeah, that's so heartbreaking, and I'm so sorry that happened to you, but, like,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, that's so common in hospital births and even home births with medical midwives that carry Pitocin. The
Mm-hmm.
baby comes out within either directly right away, they already have the needle ready, or they wait a minute or two, and then they just kind of, like you said, they don't ask. They just say, "Okay, we're giving you Pitocin." And then before you
Yep.
can even register, like you said, you're
Mm-hmm.
high on these beautiful birth hormones. Before you can
Yep.
register what she's just said, it gets
Yep.
jabbed in your thigh, and then it just takes all of that beautiful energy
Mm-hmm.
you had right out of
Yep.
you. And it's so sad and really detrimental to the whole experience between mother and baby. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that just like, oh, hearing that just breaks my heart, and that you miss
Mm,
the whole experience of your placenta being born, These are big moments in a birth experience, and
huge.
it's not fair that they're getting stolen so readily from mothers and from babies. It's really unfortunate and really
Mm,
heartbreaking.
mm. It's definitely, that was definitely an eye opener for me because I realized that they weren't doing anything for me. I was doing the process up until then.
Mhm.
Just naturally, I was listening to my body. I was listening to the baby. I was just going naturally through it and
Amalia,
instinctively
you're breaking up now. I can't hear you.
through the process.
Oh, okay, you're back. Are you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, sorry, I caught just the first half of that, and then it started to break up, and then I lost you there when in what you were saying.
Yeah, I was just speaking about how jarring it is to be in that hospital space, when it pulls you away from being in your natural state, when your body and your baby are doing exactly what needs to be done. And then the
Yeah.
hospital just, and the people and their fear and their projections just start intruding into
Mhm.
how this whole thing is going naturally.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was a disappointing part.
Mhm. Absolutely. So then how
Mm.
was your postpartum experience after this birth?
The first birth was
Yeah.
so I spent about 3 days in hospital,
Mm.
and I chose to do that because I didn't really have much support outside of that at that point as well. I had my dad and my stepmother, who are both Indonesian, but it was sort of in hospital. It was just quite a detached sort of experience,
Mm.
and um, my relationship with my daughter's father was fairly new as
Mhm.
well. And
Mhm.
yeah, it wasn't, there was no preparation, there was no food, like knowledge on how to feed myself or how to take care of myself. It was just sort of um, taking it day by day. But my stepmother did come over with some, like, she goes, oh, in Indonesia, this is what we do traditionally. She gave me special oils, and
Mm.
they have which is quite common now in the birthing world, the bengkung belly binding,
Mm.
which is Indonesian traditionally, that
Mhm.
she had brought some of those for me. I had no
Oh, yeah.
knowledge that my stomach, to do that with my womb area, stomach and stuff.
Right.
So she came over and did that. So there was that support in a way. But other than
Mhm.
that, I was just floating through that space. My daughter's father was very pushy,
Mm.
and he already wanted to leave the country. He was like, "Come on, we've got to go traveling at 2 weeks postpartum."
Oh my gosh.
I was like, absolutely no, that's not
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
So he left for a bit to see other parts of Australia because that was his first time in Australia.
Okay.
Um, but then we left, and I started traveling with the baby when she was 4.5 months, and I
Okay.
traveled for a couple of years after that with my daughter and her father.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Where did you
Yeah.
guys go when you were on your travels?
So the first place we went was Indonesia, and I stayed. That was the first country I took my daughter to.
Mm.
And we sort of just took it slow, and we just traveled through Southeast Asia. So we went Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and then went back to India and spent some
Mm.
longer period of time in India because you can get a longer visa there. And
Yeah.
then Nepal, and yeah, we mostly spent a lot of our time in the first few years in Asia. Um,
Wow.
yeah, China.
Mm.
And if we came back to Australia, we'd just sort of travel in the van and go
Mm.
up and down the coast and sell in the markets and stuff.
Mm.
So the first few years of her life were just travel.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing. I
Yeah, it
love
was good.
that.
Mm. It
I
was
love
it was
that.
difficult. It was
Mm.
as a concept it sounds much nicer than it was. Perhaps it was
Mm.
because of the relationship that I was in.
Mm.
That was quite a rocky relationship, so that made it a lot
Yeah.
more stressful.
Mm-hmm.
Changing countries every month,
Oh
but
yeah. That's a lot. That's a lot. Yeah. Like it is,
with a
it's
baby.
yeah, it's one of those things where it's that fantasy and it can, people do it all the time. It can come true. But yeah, there are all those little tiny aspects of it that can make it, as you're saying, either run smoothly or be more stressful if, the relationship isn't going as easeful as it could be. So yeah.
But it was
Wow.
beautiful because when I was traveling, I was
Mm,
being exposed to a whole other type of people, especially meeting
mm,
because I had a baby with me. There was all these
mm-hmm.
traveling families that I started to meet and connect with
Yeah.
along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first time I'd ever heard of free birth as well. When we were
Okay.
in Thailand, I met this family that were living in a bungalow. I
Mm-hmm.
think they were originally from Spain, um, but they were spent a lot of time in South America and Central America, and then they were living in Thailand. And she was telling me how she birthed one of her last baby by
Mm.
herself in I can't remember. It was somewhere in South America, and I just looked at her just like, what? That is wild. That is crazy. What do you mean no one was there? You just gave birth in the house? She goes, yeah. And she was
Mm,
just telling me the whole story about it. And that was in 2013,
mm-hmm.
my first sort of exposure to
Okay.
that whole other stream of consciousness, really. Yeah.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And then did you notice after that that you were kind of hearing more stories of this? Because, like, when that comes into your conscious field, then you know how you start attracting all of these things that really set you up for that. So then what was that kind of experience for you? Did you start like delving deeper into birth, or what was your thought process like? Because you said after you had your baby in the hospital, you were already thinking, like, I can just do this myself. So then you got the confirmation of this woman who birthed her baby
Mm.
freely in, I think you said South America. So then, yeah,
Mm.
how did that start to like get those wheels turning even more?
So yeah, I mean, I was exposed. I think it's a whole, I mean, free birth, I think, connects with so many other aspects. It is a whole shift in consciousness, and you
Mm,
are sort of being exposed to total other ways of being. That
mm,
in Australia, it's not like, especially now we are more so because of social media, but before
mm,
social media and before Instagram,
mm.
which wasn't really, it was just sort of beginning over in, unless you're in very niche communities, you don't hear about that.
Okay.
And that's what I was being exposed to. I was like, oh, you can just birth your baby anywhere, and you make money traveling on the road, and you can just travel with your family, and you don't have to go to school, and you don't have to work in the office, and you don't have to do all these things. I was like, whoa, this is like totally new, and
Mm.
it was the life that I was actually in and living.
Yeah.
And I hadn't thought about, I didn't want to have another child at that point. It was just too much, especially the relationship that I was in. It was very tumultuous relationship, but I was just sort of at least staying with the father for a few years so my daughter can get to know her. Him and I are no longer together.
Mm.
We separated back in 2015, really cut it off in 2017. So
Mm.
yeah, there was I had always felt though that I was going to have another baby, and if I was to have another baby, that I would free birth the baby.
Mhm.
And I was like, yep, I didn't think free birth. I thought home birth. I'll have it
Okay.
at home.
Mhm.
And I just sort of held that with me. And then when I moved back to Australia and I was a single mother and everything, I actually began connecting with a lot of Australian mothers here that they were having babies and they were sort of more alternative, and they were home birthing, and then home birthing sort of unfolded into free birthing. And now a lot of those women that I was connecting with during
Mm.
that time, they're sort of in the free birth world now on social media, and
Okay.
very much advocates for that sort of space.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. And then, so yeah, like lots has happened, as you're saying, from time of having your first daughter and then coming back to Australia. So then do you want to kind
Mm.
of get into the conception of your second child and how, yeah, it turned out to be the free birth that you did have?
Yeah. Well, it's it's just been such a huge journey for me between the
Mm.
two births,
Mm-hmm.
like a whole 12-year cycle,
Yeah,
which is a huge
totally.
it's a huge cycle. And I've gone from being 25 now to being 37,
Mm.
and going through a very chaotic, tumultuous relationship when I was traveling, and
Mm.
experienced some domestic violence, and then having to come back to Australia and pick, start from scratch and pick
Mm-hmm.
myself up, and
Mm-hmm.
do a lot of healing. And then I in that time I trained to be a counselor, and I sort of had to create a whole new world by myself,
Mm.
and pick myself up from nothing.
Yeah.
And in that time, connecting with beautiful um, people, and eventually finding my partner who I'm with now,
Mm.
who I who's just so beautiful, and I'm very lucky to have him in my life. But yeah, I sort of knew that I had to find him in a
Yeah.
way, because I knew that there was this other soul that wanted to come through. And now I'm 3.5 months postpartum.
Mm.
And so I birthed my second daughter 3.5 months ago.
Mm.
And yeah, that it's just been a really, there were times where I thought, no, like um it's not going to happen. I'm not going to find that person. And I wasn't
Mm.
sort of just looking for him as well. I just sort of
Mm-hmm.
knew if that person comes, then we're going to have a baby. But I just
Mm-hmm.
sort of never pushed for it, but I knew that I had to sort of at the same time actively seek it. It wasn't just
Okay.
gonna fall into my lap. And
Mm-hmm.
then, yeah, when I met him, there were just a lot of uncanny similarities between our lives. We both were single parents. We both had at the time daughters of the same age.
Oh,
We
wow.
both had separated from our partners at the same time. We
Mm-hmm.
actually grew up around the same area when we were children, but we'd never met each other.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and we were both half Asian as well. He's half Filipino, I'm half Indonesian. So we
Mm.
had that understanding of each other, because when
Mm.
you're a halfie, we call ourselves, it's quite a particular kind of frame of mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's you're not fully white and you're not fully brown, and sometimes it's really difficult to connect with those
Mm-hmm.
either community, because you don't feel like you're a part of one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And so, him and I were able to connect on all of these levels, and I just sort of knew,
Mm.
we're going to have a baby. And
Mm.
uh, when I was sort of conscious conception, and I was reading. Because I'd done a lot of womb work as well, and healing a lot of the pain and trauma, and especially on my mother's side,
Okay.
there's a lot of pain, and she's the white Australian, and there's just so much trauma. My mother sort of abandoned me in some way, and her mother had abandoned her, and so there was that
Okay.
lineage of on the maternal line that it seems wants a lot of healing. Why I've birthed two daughters as well, even though
Mm-hmm.
I wanted a son, but that's okay. But it's like, okay, I think maybe the feminine and the maternal healing needs to be done a
Yeah.
lot more on that side. And then so yeah, I was doing a lot of reading. One book particular was called Womb Awakening, and that
Mm.
book really showed me how to connect to those, to reconnect, and call in that soul,
Right.
who I knew had been floating around.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, even though, yeah, there's just so much to so many different aspects and fractals to that story and how I
Mm-hmm.
got there, because I
Mm-hmm.
had actually fallen pregnant a few years in between that with a partner that I didn't. I wasn't sort of a long-term partner or somebody that I could
Yeah.
see myself. And then I had I had an ectopic pregnancy and a miscarriage in that. And so that whole experience taught
Mm.
me something even deeper, and
Right.
it healed some parts of my spirit, to bring me to the point of conceiving my daughter that I just birthed. If that
Wow.
makes that makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard of that from many women that I speak
Mm,
to that have, they have their first or second babes, and then they go through an experience where they have an early pregnancy release or something, and it does bring a lot of healing from their first birth experiences. It brings healing into their whole mother line, like it just ripples. And then some of them have said like it was that baby that needed to come through to do the healing work for this mother and her vessel for another child to come through, or that child will then like do the healing in the mother, release themselves, and then they come back, in a little bit, a couple months later or a couple years later, whatever it is. So yeah, to
mm,
hear you say that, I absolutely believe that because I hear it so often and it makes so
yeah,
much sense to me that these
mm,
babies, because they're on a completely different plane, they're in the spirit world, they have so much more
mm,
information than we can even conceptualize in our, silly human physical brains that,
yeah.
yeah, they're just working on such a different frequency than us, so they know what they're doing.
Yeah. And that's what that sort of taught me as well, about how it's so energetic, and it's actually quite a deeply spiritual work.
Mm-hmm.
And these souls are speaking on that other frequency, and that's what had happened previously, because I knew that the person that I had fell pregnant with, I was like, whoa, like,
Mm.
I can't imagine you being the father of my child.
Yeah.
But that whole experience, when I had asked that soul. Well, I only thought I had one pregnancy in my body. I had two at the same time, but I had to go into ceremony, and I had to have
Mm.
this whole spiritual experience of asking it to leave my body. That I loved it so much, and I
Mm.
actually deeply yearned for a baby, but this just wasn't it. This wasn't the
Mhm.
time.
Mm.
And I had to really, the experience was quite a visualization experience as well.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, that baby left my my physical vessel, And
Mhm.
it was sort of this awakening to me, like, this is real, like speaking to their spirit and
Mhm.
acknowledging that intensity and that connection is real. And
Mhm.
even the person that I was pregnant with at the time, he was very much not into any of this kind of spiritual energy and all of that kind of stuff. And even he was sort of like, whoa, wow,
Mm.
like it awakened something in him as well. I don't know how that's changed his journey because I don't speak to him anymore,
Mhm.
but that was sort of like, okay, this is real. And that sort of brought me into the space now when I was conceiving my current daughter with my current partner. And yeah, I just remember being, the whole process had been very conscious and had
Yeah.
been tuning into my body, tuning into spirit, tuning into its spirit, and
Mhm.
ancestors of my ancestors and my partner's ancestors, and all of the healing that needed to be done, and the purpose on bringing this baby into the world. It was just, yeah, a lot more conscious than my first.
Wow.
But they all have their purpose as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been.
Absolutely. Wow, that's
Mhm.
amazing. That's so beautiful to hear.
Mhm.
That's really is so beautiful, and that's the way, in my opinion and in my mind, how I feel that all women need to be entering into their pregnancy journeys, getting that deeply connected to themselves, getting that deeply connected to this baby, the spirit, whether this child decides to stay and come into the physical realm, or whether this child just decides to be, physical in the womb for a while and then take their leave and go and do whatever they need to do. Just having that deep connection, that deep reverence in and of ourselves as women, and bringing that connection to our children is so, so important and so potent as well for us as women to connect to our power, connect to our intuition, connect to the innate ability that we have, because that is, like, we are the divine channels from here to source. Like, it happens through our bodies and is held through the vessel of our womb, and we need to be tapping into that all of
Mm,
the time, I believe. So it's just
yeah.
so, so beautiful to hear that on your journey from first babe to second babe, you did, years of work, and then it all led to this beautiful culmination of you bringing in this second child and consciously conceiving this child and connecting with this child. It just, yeah, it, like, warms my heart to hear that.
Yeah, it's like, that's what I was saying earlier, like the 12 years in between has
Mm,
been such there've been some of the most painful moments of my life
mm,
where I've actually wanted to leave this planet, to being some of the most beautiful moments of my life as well.
mm,
And all of the experiences that I've had to just bring me to this point on being able to go, you can really trust your body, you can trust spirit, you can trust, you know, how the body works, and,
mm,
all of those aspects. And it has been fine tuning the intuition as well, even
mhm,
though my first birth was very intuitive in many ways and very heart led. But it's that growth that happens just as a woman, as a person,
yeah,
that helps to bring that. But it is, in my mind, I'm like, that's very natural. But then when
mhm,
you think about other people's experiences, you're like, okay, you just maybe it would be helpful for you to just start tuning more into yourself, because everybody has that, but it's like
mhm.
we get programmed to sort of block it out.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah. And I think that's what it's about. It's like unlearning not to block those things out, that there is value and there is truth in those deep sort of nudges that come from within, or that come from God or great
Mm.
spirit, however you want to sort of see it. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Music to my ears. Yeah, wow, that's so beautiful.
Mm,
Do you want to then start getting into and moving into, from this conception journey, into the actual time that you found out you were pregnant? Like, how did you find out? What was that experience like for you?
yeah. So I was actually working in a crystal shop in a neighborhood that is one of the more alternative neighborhoods here in Sydney. And but with alternative, it can be quite heavy. And there, for me personally, I think the energy of this area was um, very intense. And I think the closer you get to becoming pregnant or being in that portal, I suppose, you become to get more sensitive, and you sort of begin opening up your vessel to welcome a spirit to come into the body.
Yeah.
And during that time while I was working in this crystal shop, I was just becoming more and more sensitive, that my nervous system was becoming really fried, because there are a lot of people in this neighborhood, like especially that come into the crystal shop, because it's a very open, welcoming space of all types of people. But it was becoming scary for me in a way, because it was all I don't know how to sort of explain it, but there's drug addiction, and with drug addiction brings in sort of mental illness and that kind of thing. That was sort of entering my space, and I was just going, no, I can't be in this. I can't be in this environment anymore, because I didn't realize then, but I sort of did. I'm becoming more sensitive because my vessel's opening.
Yeah.
And so I ended up having to quit the crystal shop. And I remember this day that I cancelled. It was like one of the days before I quit the shop that I was like, okay, I'm going to take out my daughter and my partner's daughter. I'm going to take them, because it was school holidays. I'm going to cancel work. I need this day for my nervous system, and I'm going to take them to the waterfall, which is which is where I currently live, around this area. But I took them to this waterfall place. We went on a little bushwalk, and we were all sort of cleansing. I think it was eclipse. It was eclipse season 2023 last year. And so we went there, and I remember it was almost like we were all cleansing ourselves. And so we were all in the water sort of cleansing, and I was like, thank God I'm not at the shop, and I'm having a great day. But I had this download, or this nudge, or this feeling. I could feel this spirit saying, I'm coming.
Yeah.
And I just sort of like, okay, this is it. The baby's coming. Like, now's the time. This feels right. And then it was very much consciously conceived from that point. Around that time, I think it was in that week or so, that we called her in, and she was very loud. Although we both thought it was a boy.
Okay.
Perhaps she was a boy in a previous lifetime and was just showing up in that form, but she ended up being a girl, but female. And then that moment was clear that she was coming. And then when we were conceiving, it was very much kind of saying, you're well. I remember sort of listening to music and just crying. I actually filmed myself, which I was like, I would like to share this one day maybe. But I remember just sort of having my hands over my womb in this week or two, because I think conception is not just the moment of intimacy either. I think it's a whole process that goes over a couple of weeks, where you really are in communion with God, and communion with the soul that's coming into the body, and just sort of saying, I remember sort of crying, and how much I wanted this, how much I missed this person or this spirit in a way, and just sort of saying, my womb is a safe place. You're safe here. You can safely come in. And found out a few weeks later that I was pregnant.
Wow.
and wasn't surprised at all. I actually knew before, there was any other sign to
Mm.
confirm that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love
Even
that.
yeah, but I did go and get a blood test, and the doctor was sort of like, you are very, when I got the results back from you're like very, very newly pregnant. But I had already felt like I already knew. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't really need to go and get the blood test because I already knew in my body. I'm like, yeah, I'm pregnant.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's amazing. I love hearing that
Mm,
when, and that's just women tuning in to their bodies. When you really get in connection with yourself, you get in connection with
mm,
your womb, with your heart, you can know exactly when this baby has landed within the womb, when this baby has come in, into your
mm,
physical being. And you don't need the pregnancy test to, quote
mm,
unquote, confirm it because
mm.
you just know. Like as women, if
Yeah,
we really get that deep into ourselves, we just know.
absolutely.
That's the magic of it.
Mm,
Yeah. So
yeah,
what
but
was
then
oh,
yeah.
sorry.
No,
Nope,
no,
go
no.
ahead.
Go, go.
Oh, I was gonna
Oh
say
no, it's right.
I was just gonna say, what was your pregnancy journey then like if that whole conception stage of it was so magical and beautiful?
Yeah, well, I mean, that was when it was beautiful, and then I got into the depths of
Mm.
pregnancy, and
Mm.
the beginning of the pregnancy was quite a bit. The first few weeks, I was like, I felt so at ease
Mhm.
and had that beautiful sense of grace and in my world. But then I think pregnancy really brings up a lot of your shadows as well.
Mhm.
And then I knew that I wanted to free birth, but then because I'd had an ectopic pregnancy and the early pregnancy during that same time, and all of that whole experience was quite traumatic.
Mm.
Because with the ectopic, I had to get rushed to hospital because I collapsed,
Oh,
and
wow.
then a whole, sort of number of things sort of happened at that period of time. It was 9 weeks already that I had a pregnancy in my fallopian tube,
Wow.
and there's no other way really about it at that point but to get it removed. And
Mhm.
that was having a fallopian tube removed, which
Oh,
at the same
no.
time, yeah, which at the same time it was, I felt when I had that whole tube removed, or the uterine tube, should
Mm.
we call it? When I had that removed and the pregnancy as well, it was it was like something else was being removed from me at the same time, which was related to like pains and traumas of not just mine, but of
Mm.
my mother and my grandmother and whoever else is in that line. That's
Wow.
how I had felt, but
Mm.
it brought me closer to spirit. But yeah, at the beginning of this pregnancy, I was so nervous that that was a possibility,
Yeah.
and so it was, and I was just kind of on edge as I got into around 10, 11, 12 weeks.
Mhm.
I just wanted to sort of make sure that this baby was in my uterus. So I did get, I think that was, I did get a scan. So my pregnancy wasn't a completely wild pregnancy, in those terminologies,
Mm.
because yeah, and that was a part of me going, you know what, that's okay,
Mhm.
because I'm tuning in to what I feel is best for me.
Absolutely.
And even though I had a lot of friends that have done wild pregnancies, and I knew that, okay, you don't just have to follow this trend or what is working for other people. Just tune
Mm.
into what you feel is right for you, and sort of battling those sort of things in my own mind as well, and
Mhm.
going, you're not a failure for doing that. It's okay.
Mhm.
And yeah, so I had to make sure that the baby was in my uterus, and she was. And then, as all pregnancies go, the first trimester, well, not all pregnancies, but pregnancy for on the spiritual level is very much a period of time that is not just physically getting you ready.
Mm-hmm.
for the baby, but it's mentally, emotionally, spiritually preparing you for this new chapter. And then with
Mm-hmm.
any new chapter is like this death of sorts, part of you is kind of dying and a new person is being born. And I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
how that was going to unfold because I've had a baby before.
Right.
But it was just a whole new experience, and a lot of it wasn't as beautiful as I had envisioned it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Earlier in my life, I thought if I ever have another baby, I'd like to be in the mountains. I'd like to be surrounded by just nature. But there were a lot of circumstances where that couldn't happen. But it was like this baby, she came into our world and she said, no, you're going to have to upgrade everything. You
Mm.
have to. And she just, we totally moved into a new area here in Sydney, which is where I grew up as a child. And yeah, everything sort of
Mm-hmm.
unfolded and changed for us as a family. So it
Yeah.
wasn't just me that was experiencing this change and this shift. It was like this baby telling us, okay, you need to get this prepared and this prepared, and you need to
Mm-hmm.
get rid of that. And you've got to be on your best behavior as well as the vessel
Mm-hmm.
in many ways to make it an accommodating environment and preparing for how she was to land. And then
Mm-hmm.
when I was we had to move house because the place that I was living was not it started to feel very unaligned or
Mm.
wrong for us,
Yeah.
especially if we were birthing at home.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was inspecting this place that I'm currently in, she was actually born in this room.
Oh, wow.
Um, I remember when I was inspecting it, I walked into this room and I felt, and we'd looked at so many places, and in Sydney, like other places in the world at the moment, there's a
Mm.
housing crisis.
Mm.
So it's very difficult to find, especially renting a rental. But and there were like 20 other people looking at this place, but I walked into this room and I said, "Yep, I'm going to birth the baby in this room." The baby,
Mm.
it was almost like his voice was like, "The baby will be born in this room."
Mm-hmm.
And I just sort of felt that, and I said, the whole everything felt right and it fell into place. And then we ended up moving here, and then she ended up being born in this room, which is
Wow.
funny. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, I love
Mm.
that. Yeah. Again, it's just you listening to your intuition, listening to your baby, like you're
Mm.
saying, getting you to clear things out and make space and make way, clean your vessel, clean your,
Mm.
immediate area and all of that. And like that's
Mm.
just so amazing and incredible that you had that
Yeah.
deep, deep listening, that deep, deep knowing of yourself and your child. And I do believe that how connected you were to this baby and doing all these things that may have been like, we're upending our whole life, we're moving this and doing that. But
Yeah.
it goes to show that like when you do this in that pregnancy time and in the prenatal time,
Mm.
the work and the effort that you do shows so beautifully in the birthing experience when you get into
Yeah.
that birth portal because you've built so much trust with yourself, so much trust with your baby, so much trust with your intuition
Yeah.
that when you get into your birth portal, you're not
Mm.
really second guessing yourself because you already know that you can trust the words that you have to say, the words that your child has to say, the guidance that you're getting as you're navigating all of these
Mm.
beautiful spaces that you're going to go to.
Yeah.
So with that being said, do you want to kind of get to the lead up of your birth experience and how it was getting into the birth portal?
Yeah. So, and then we actually moved to this place. The last scan that I got, which was the 20-week scan, and that same day, I went to a women's circle that's in
Mm.
this neighborhood, which was for specifically free birthing,
Mm.
which there is a community in this area of Sydney, which is not very common in other areas,
Mm.
that is particularly more sort of open to free birthing. And so that all happened the same day that I
Mm.
moved into this new area. So it was like, here is the new chapter.
Yeah.
We got the keys that same day. I had the last scan, and I was, surrounded by women that were in the free birth sort of space.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that point onwards, it was sort of an unfolding in this environment
Yeah.
to make it a comfortable environment to start nesting in a way, and creating that space for the baby, and softening and finding that safety to be able to, explore all of the things that come up in that second half of pregnancy in preparation for the birth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there were a lot of different shadows that come up
Mm-hmm.
as well. And I was also doing a mentorship with for free birth, to be a birth worker at some point in the future. I plan to get deeper into birth work, and so I was exploring all of that. That was all un. It was just all just happening. It
Mm-hmm.
was like I didn't really control anything. I was just following the nudges, and it was all
Yeah.
unfolding for me.
Yeah.
I just had to listen, um, and then I stopped working at the crystal shop, and then I was just working for myself, which was sort of slowing down,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, just allowing myself to be in this space, in this environment, and just going out to the national park, which we live next to, and just being more sort of less involved in society, I suppose, and then
Mm-hmm.
more sort of connected to just raw
Yeah.
nature, because I suppose society is a part of our nature as human beings in many ways. But yeah, just being sort of more with the trees, and with the
Mm-hmm.
wind, and with the
Mm-hmm.
water, with the ocean, and those sort of those parts, just sort of reminding me that nature will be nature, and
Mm-hmm.
the nature as a woman is to, especially a pregnant woman, is it will unfold naturally, just
Yeah.
like a flower will. If you water it right, and you get the right amount of sunlight, and you get the right amount of water, and you're in the right
Mm-hmm.
environment, then you can only blossom
Mm-hmm.
naturally, as it should go, because
Mm-hmm.
that's what your seed is. The blueprint of your seed is supposed to do. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
um, so that's pretty much what had happened, and it was just very, yeah, it became just allowing. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's how it sort of felt. And then when, yeah, just I'm just remembering getting into that portal, and just how
Mm.
soft, it felt. Everything just sort of, it's like mud was when you're in the water, and you're sort of moving around a lot in the mud.
Mm-hmm.
Or the mud is sort of all over the water, but then when you just sort of start settling and allowing, all the
Mm-hmm.
mud sort of sinks to the bottom of the water, and the water becomes clearer. And
Yeah.
that's just sort of how it sort of begun feeling,
Mm-hmm.
um, when I got into that birth portal, I suppose, and that silence, um, before that raw primal state, um, not overtakes, but takes over,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is, yeah, it's just allowing. It was just really allowing my body to be in that primal state as well. And but because we were free birthing as well, it was the preparation for that with my partner as
Mm-hmm.
well, getting everything together,
Mm-hmm.
ensuring, are you sure that you're okay with this, to my partner?
Mm-hmm.
Because, we don't want to get to the day, and then all of your fears come up, and they sort of start intruding into that space.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of work that we had to do as a couple as well, to ensure that both of us are on the same page, and we really
Mm-hmm.
had to protect that space by um, not really telling many people
Yeah.
that what we were doing as well, because when we did tell people, sometimes they can project a lot of that fear,
Mm-hmm.
and there's all of that conditioning that other people sort of have that they project onto our experience. So to protect our own space, we didn't really tell many people. I didn't even tell my dad. I did tell my mum,
Mm-hmm.
and she was sort of okay. I'll trust you. But yeah, are you sure you don't want me to be there at the birth? And I was like, no, I love you, but I know how
Mm-hmm.
you can be. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I remember I had a mother blessing,
Yeah.
which is at 7 months. So in Indonesia, I did try to incorporate a lot of Indonesian and Javanese sort of traditions into the pregnancy
Mm-hmm.
and the birth and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So at 7 months, they also have sort of a sort of similar mother blessing to make the space
Yeah.
a comfortable space. So that's what I had. But I did have friends that were not accustomed to free birth come to the mother blessing.
Mm-hmm.
And later on, a friend said, "Oh, how did people react when you said you were free birthing?" And I said, "I didn't notice. No one said anything." But apparently, my other friend said, "No. When you said you were free birthing, everyone went quiet."
Oh, really?
And I didn't notice.
Yeah.
I've in my own world sometimes everyone went
Yeah.
quiet, sort of like, oh, side eyeing, but not in a
Mm.
bad way, because
Mm-hmm.
the women that were there, they love me and they care
Mm-hmm.
about me, and it's not out of my spectrum to do this. But one
Yeah.
of my friends sort of said, I think
Okay.
there was that sort of energy of fear in the space,
Okay.
or like, oh,
Yeah.
really? Is that a great idea? I don't think we should be
Right.
doing that.
Oh, interesting. But it's so
Mm,
beautiful that you know you set such strong boundaries that it didn't
yes.
even affect you, you know, as you're saying you were just
Yeah.
in your own world, you were just speaking freely to what you were doing and just enjoying
Mm,
it. And then it was,
mm,
outside of the boundary that you had set. These
yeah.
other women and people that were there could have their own
Mm,
feelings. And it's like, well,
yeah.
that's fine because I'm grounded in what I'm doing, my decision, what's best for me and my child. So
Yeah.
that's really neat. Um,
Boundaries. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so important to
Mm,
have them, especially when you're doing
huge.
this in this way,
Hmm.
100%.
Hmm.
But I wanted to ask you quickly, because your first daughter was about maybe 11, 12 at the time of this pregnancy. So did
Yeah.
you how did she feel about this? Was she excited? Did you speak to her about birthing from home? Like how involved was she, or was she just kind of like, ah, you do what you want to do. I don't want to, she's almost a teenager. Was she just kind of like, Mom, do your own thing. I don't really care. Was she really excited? And like, how did you involve her in this?
Yeah. So she she just trusts in
Mm,
anything that I do, really.
mm,
And I said, because I've got her and my stepdaughter, or my partner's daughter, and they're both the same age as well.
mhm,
They're a few months apart. So they're throughout the pregnancy they were both 11 years old. So both
mhm,
of them, they're kind of like chalk and cheese. One of
mm,
them has grown up more in, the sort of general society, and my daughter has sort of grown up in the alternative
mm,
society a
mm.
lot. So she's sort of been like, yeah, that's fine. I'm like, well, both of you can be around for the birth if you want. And they're sort of like, ew. And then I was like, do you do you want to see a birth video? And they were sort of like, no. And then I started to show them one birth video while I was pregnant of another woman free birthing, and they were just, once they saw
Mm.
a naked woman, they were just sort of like, ah,
Yeah.
what? At that awkward stage. But
Mm,
when when they saw me going to like the free birth circle, I remember that day that they were both very interested.
mm,
My daughter, she's used to that because I've been sort of doing that sort of thing since she was born. But my
Mm-hmm.
partner's daughter was her eyes were sort of opening to this whole
Mm.
other way of being, and she's like, "Are you guys going to be summoning demons?" I'm like,
Oh
"No."
gosh.
No demons. But there's a part of her, because I think that is innate in all little girls, of that magic,
Mm-hmm.
and that beauty that exists in the world. So there
Mm-hmm.
was that interest as well. So both of them were interested, but not too interested, not too keen, to be
Okay.
honest. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Um, mm, yeah.
Cool. So
She's
that,
my
oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
my yeah, with a lot of my friends that my daughter knows as well. She knows of a lot of my other mother friends, as
Mm.
many of them have free births and given birth at home. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
really something unusual to her either.
Mm. Okay. Yeah. So
Mm,
that's just her
yeah.
kind of baseline norm. It's like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
women get pregnant, they just birth at home, whatever.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I
which
love
is
that.
beautiful. And I love that that's
Mm-hmm.
just normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how it
Mm,
should be, especially for these young girls should just see it as something like, oh, okay, there's my mom has another friend who's pregnant. She's just gonna birth at home again.
yeah.
It should just be
Okay.
that
Yeah.
simple, that yeah, that just basic. So that's
Hmm.
really cool that even though they didn't have, such deep interest where they're like, yes, we want to be there, we want to experience it all, they're still
Hmm.
getting it. They're still
Yeah.
getting that exposure and they're still getting
Hmm.
that normalcy of it's just birth, it's just happening at home. It's
Yeah.
just simple. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
cool.
that's how simple it is. It's a part of everyday life. And they've seen me go through that process, and I'm
Mhm.
not always at the hospital or going to appointments, and
Mhm.
realizing that hospital is more associated with a medical emergency.
Mhm.
Whereas, with for my daughter, my father had been in hospital, and we'd been
Mm.
in and out of hospital a lot in the last few years.
Mhm.
Many times every day we'd be at hospital, and that association was it's for being sick or having
Mhm.
a medical emergency. So there's not
Mhm.
that association for her,
Right.
because
Yeah.
she hasn't seen me going
Yeah.
to hospital. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. Wow.
Mm.
So do you want to get into those moments of when your birth started with the second babe and how that experience was for you?
Yeah. So I think it was I we'd been preparing for this, but my partner had he got 16 weeks of maternity or paternity leave.
Mhm.
So his leave begun on the day of my due date. I think that's also another reason I had to get a scan as well, to confirm for his work, to get
Oh,
the
okay.
16 weeks. That was another reason
Mm.
as well. So he had kept telling the baby, just wait until I'm on leave and then you can come,
Mhm.
just wait. And she did. Literally, I think
Mm.
it was the day after he was on leave that
Yeah.
I started getting contractions. So
Oh.
it's so funny how close their relationship
Mhm.
was as well, even just in that spiritual form,
Yeah.
before she arrived. And now you can see their relationship,
Mm.
how close it is even now. She's only
Mhm.
3.5 months old. You can, they're together now.
Yeah.
And that bond was already coming through before. And so it wasn't just me and the baby, it was also him, how closely tied in my partner is with the
Mhm.
birthing process as well. And how I think that's important. Like, often men are sort of not always just like, the light isn't on them in these processes, but in this
Yeah.
one, which is so beautiful for me, um, because that wasn't the case with my first daughter, that he's
Mm.
really been a part of that process, and he's
Mm.
trusted me and he's trusted the baby, and then
Mhm.
he's had to trust himself in
Yeah.
that as well. And it's really opened his eyes, not just like this, but
Mhm.
since, going through this whole process, it's like radicalized every other aspect of his life as well, which is really
Yeah.
funny.
Oh, I love that.
Um, yes, but yeah, we just I it was a long labor
Mm,
for this baby, and that was throughout the whole pregnancy. I kept saying, I'm going to be patient with you, and I trust you. And it
mm.
was like when the time came to actually have to birth her, it was like, yeah, can you really be patient? Are you really going to trust me? And that's what I had to deeply cultivate and do in this, because I started having went into early labor on a Saturday night. And
Mm,
we thought, yep, this is going to be the night. And we started getting everything ready,
mm.
because we were planning on probably laboring in the bedroom.
Yeah.
So we put down everything like the canvas over the bed and over the carpet, just to make sure I didn't bleed on the carpet or anything. And then I was laboring in front of my birth altar with the birth ball or the yoga ball, Pilates ball, or whatever. And then sunrise came, and I spent actually most of the night by myself in the lounge room, um, in front of the altar, and I
Mhm.
had the music and the fairy lights and the candles, and I thought I'll wake up my partner. He should sleep now, just in case we won't sleep for a bit. He should sleep now, and I'll wake him up
Mm,
when I really feel that it's time, and
mhm.
I'll just sort of be with myself and with my ancestors and with spirit. But then the sunrise came, and the contractions waned, and that's how it sort of happened for a few days during
Okay.
the night. As soon as the sun went down, the intensity would start happening.
Mm.
That happened from Saturday night until eventually I birthed her on a Thursday morning, a quarter to
Wow.
three.
Oh my
So that
goodness. Wow, that's a long time. Like it's
it,
totally normal, but it's from Saturday to the Thursday of just continually like starting, stopping, starting, stopping. Wow.
mhm, yeah, and
Wow.
that's sort of similar how my first birth went as
Mm-hmm.
well. So I was kind of prepared for that to be a possibility. I was
Yeah.
hoping
Yeah.
that it was going to be sort of, yeah, I'm in labor.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go. There
Mm-hmm.
she is. But no,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't that, because my intention for the birth was blissful birth. I'm having a blissful birth. And I suppose it was blissful in retrospect, but bliss not necessarily meaning uh not intense,
Mm. Okay.
because it was still very intense. And then I ended up calling my daughter Sachi, which is it's a word in Sanskrit. It can mean bliss
Mm.
as well. So that was a part of that whole process as well. And so the each day it would intensify, but
Mm.
during the day it was like nothing, almost nothing was happening. And every night would get more and more intense.
Mm.
And with that intensity, it was, these waves where I'd be like fully prepared and happy and sort of laughing and really feeling ready. And then it would go away, and then it was sort of almost chipping away at my trust,
Mm.
and bringing up these shadows. And then I made the mistake of um, sort of messaging friends, or
Mm.
because people started to check in because I wasn't active. I wasn't replying to message. I wasn't active on social media. And so
Mm.
closer friends, like other people I didn't really pay attention to, but closer friends would contact me. And then I made the mistake of sort of replying. And
Mm.
then, is that normal? Like my mom would, is it normal that it should be taking this long? And are
Mm.
you sure it's okay? And I had to start, um, you know, reassuring other people that everything was okay with me, which was towards the end. It's actually, you know, is the baby here yet? Like my brother
Mm.
or my dad would message, and I'm like, I'm still in early labor. It's
Mhm.
all right. everything's okay. And then it got to this point where I'm like, no, I need to just block out everybody.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
I did. And then there were, yeah, there were a lot of things that happened in that because it was quite a long time from Saturday until Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of things that were coming up in this journey,
Mm-hmm.
in while I was in the birth portal, which were just sort of almost like testing me. Can you really do this? Are you really prepared? Do you
Mm-hmm.
really have those boundaries? Which was like big lessons that have been happening over the last 12 years as
Mm.
well. So all of it was just sort of like condensing into this moment as well.
Wow.
Even my partner's ex, she was making a fuss and asking him to, I was literally the day I gave birth pretty much and in labor, she was asking him to go and do something. Like
Oh
to
my
to
gosh.
go and drive like an hour and a half away to drop something over to, for his daughter, because his daughter was at her house at the time. And I
Right.
just remember being in this portal, like, are you fucking serious?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Wow.
I'm in labor.
Yeah.
So that sort of there were those tests that were coming
Mm-hmm.
up in the moment, but it was sort of like, oh, okay, no, you need to get into this space and
Yeah.
sort of speaking to the baby. And then yeah, by the time I sort of was like, no, this is never going to happen. I'm going to be pregnant forever. And I was sort of having those sort of conversations with myself. And then, so it was the Wednesday where I got to my, I was kind of giving up and I said, no, because the plan was to keep going about normal life until I couldn't go about normal life anymore. And
Right.
then I'd know I was really in active labor,
Right.
so to speak. But then, yeah, it got to Wednesday and I gave up in a way, in a sense. And then I said, no, I'm going to watch a show. Um, that's it. So I got into bed, even though I was quite uncomfortable. And I opened my laptop and put a show on. And then it's almost like when I gave up, that's when it started to happen. And
Okay.
I got into about 15 minutes of the show, which I didn't really, wasn't really paying attention to. And then that I was like, okay, I've got to get up. And
Mm.
then I sat in front of the altar. And then, yeah, I just was laboring deeper and deeper. And it was just, okay, think, I think this is it. And then messaged my partner and he was busy, taking care of the girls as well
Mm.
and running and doing this and trying to manage everything. Thankfully, he was on leave.
Mm.
And I was like, yep, this is it. And then so I'd already prepped him and my daughter. They were the only ones that were around at the time. So they already knew how to, just to sort of leave me, unless I sort of asked, and not to turn the television on or put music on or make
Mm-hmm.
too much of a, if they're in the space around me. But they were sort of still around, like my I'd have my moments where I was just biting into the pillow because I pretty much spent my whole time laboring with the dining room chair, which was
Okay.
never a part of the plan. But I took the dining room chair and I had a pillow on it, and I just sort of leant over the chair and held onto the back of the chair, and I was just sort of squeezing that. And every time that I wanted to scream, I sort of just screamed into the pillow
Mm-hmm.
or bit into the pillow because we live in an apartment. And
Okay.
I was at the same time, which was not always ideal. I was still conscious of noise in the
Mm.
apartment. I didn't want to be screaming
Mm-hmm.
for hours, but I ended up doing that anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a part of um, what was happening. And then, yeah, it was just sort of the world was just continuing around me while I was just getting deeper into this space. And I think my partner, he wasn't really sure. He was just trusting me and he wasn't really sure when it would happen because he couldn't feel what was the processes that were happening inside of my body. And I wasn't always able to communicate with him exactly where I was because I was
Mm.
so getting deeper and deeper into the space. But then um, my daughter was the next day, she was to start her first day of high school,
Oh, wow.
which was which is quite a significant moment in her life.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'd usually be there to take her to school and see her off and take a photo. Wow, you're going to school. And yeah, that didn't end up happening. But so she was preparing her uniform. She had to grow up in that moment as well because I wasn't there to do everything that I usually do for her. So
Right.
she had to prepare her lunch, prepare her bag, prepare her uniform and everything. Um, to for that, and so that was quite significant in that chapter shifting for her too. So it
Mm-hmm.
was like this birth was rippling out to everybody. When one dynamic changes, it in turn will change the dynamic around that
Mm-hmm.
family unit. So she had to grow up, and then in that way, and then I just labored into the night. And then I knew from my first birth how good hot water in the shower would be. I did try in those days to have a hot bath, a warm bath, but that was yeah, I didn't like being in the bath at all. It's just being immersed in water is just I didn't really like it when I had my first daughter baby as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that vibes with me, but the shower, hot
Mm-hmm.
shower, yes. And just swaying in the shower, that was like a godsend for me. And then luckily the bathroom is next to my bedroom, so I was just in and out, in and out. And by that, as the night got deeper, um, I was naked, just going in and out between the shower and then in the bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
There was no music by this time because the beginning of early labor, earlier in the week, I had my birth music on, and it was more aesthetically pleasing.
Mm-hmm.
But then, yeah, the more primal it got, I was like, I didn't even want to be touched by my partner toward, like, he was like rubbing my back, and I was just sort of like,
Yeah.
get your hand off me. I just need to be alone. And then he recalls, he's like, you were making noises that were just so primal. Like they were like animal noises. Like I'd never heard anyone making those noises before. And I couldn't even say them now if I wanted to, or
Yeah.
repeat those sounds. It was just like these growls and like these sounds that
Mm-hmm.
are beautiful in retrospect. And but then because I hadn't really slept in many days, um, I was like my energy was really waning, and
Yeah.
I was losing a lot of that momentum. The
Mm.
hot water in my shower, I used the full tank, and we have a pretty big water tank of hot water, and that was cold water. And I
Mm.
was like, no, no more showers. And then the last shower I had, I was like, by the time I ended up leaving that, I was starting to shake, and I was like
Okay.
kind of Googling in those, is this normal to shake? And I was starting to like lose, like, maybe I need to go to hospital. Like maybe this isn't right. And then I
Mm.
knew, no, you must be close if you want to go to hospital, because I'd
Okay.
already
Yeah.
read that, and I'd learned that through the mentorship that I'd been through, which I learned an incredible amount of stuff in that mentorship. But so there were all these processes happening, and I was like very, very close to the point of giving birth, and then I was
Mm.
just sort of losing faith in some way. And then my partner was like seeing me sort of looking as though I was losing faith, and he was sort of like, oh. And I was laying in bed, and I was just starting to tell him that I was dying. I was
Mm.
looking at him across the room like, I'm dying, I'm dying, I'm dying. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm dying. And he was trying not to panic for me,
Right.
because he was like, what the hell? You were the pillar of that I
Yeah.
was trusting, and now you're
Yeah.
losing faith.
Mm.
Um, and I did say to him, like, okay, well, maybe we need to start preparing for the possibility of going to hospital. And then he was like, later on, he mentioned to me, well, like maybe half an hour later, well, should we prepare for hospital? Do you want me to look up, whatever, something about hospital? And I just looked at him like, no. And I hit him, which I really regretted in that instant that I'd smacked him. And he sort of looked at me like, what the hell? Like, and that was something I apologized straight away. I was like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. And then he had to leave the space. He knew, okay, she's just in that, like, that, that world. And then he came back, and then it was just like one candle in the room. And then he was just laying on one side of the bed, and then I was like just very low in energy. And then I was like, maybe I'd read women had felt to see where the head was. So I put my fingers and I started to feel like maybe I could feel the head, and I could. I was like, I can feel the head. I can feel the head. And I was like, I can feel the head. And he was like, okay. So that kind of gave us that motivation or that momentum to keep going.
Yeah.
But then nothing was it felt like nothing was happening, but there was a lot happening. But then, like, maybe a next half an hour or hour, she still hadn't come. And I was like, no. And then I felt again, and then I could feel the sack. So I'd also read or heard other women before, they had scratched the sack so that the water broke a bit. So I did that, and I scratched the sack, and then a little bit of water came out on one of the dry mats underneath me, and then I was like, the water broke. So that I was like, no, it's got to come. Like, it's she's got to come. And then I looked over at my partner, and I maybe about 20 minutes, half an hour, I looked over at him like, yep, like I couldn't speak, but I kind of tried to telepathically tell him, like, it's about to happen. And I wanted him to film the moment, because I didn't get that with my first birth, and I wanted to look back over that moment. But no, that didn't happen, because we were just so, but that's okay. Like, we were just so deeply in it. And he kind of came over to me, and I was leaning over the chair, and then she was crowning, and then was just, I wasn't even pushing, she was just coming out. And that's like, my roar was very loud, 2:45 in the morning. And yeah, I screamed, I roared her out. She sort of was coming out. At the same time, I I did a poo as well. So my partner was behind me. We joke about it now. Well, at least and then you shat on me. And it was just it's a running joke that we have. But because I was like, as she came out, I was like, can you grab her? Can you grab her? And he was trying to maneuver the baby so that I wasn't pooing on her, and that the baby wasn't falling in my poo. And then he sort of lifted her through my legs to me, and I grabbed her. And then he was just so wonderful in those moments, because he was like making the space, like tidying the space and everything, so that then it was just, we were just elated, like, both of us. I just like sort of sat on the floor, and I was just crying like this, weeping like like, after all this effort and how long, and then this moments of feeling like it wasn't ever going to happen. And yeah, just pouring tears. And we both just like sat there crying and just looking at her. And then we were like, she's so beautiful. And then she was crying. Wow. But her umbilical cord was quite short. So I was like, oh no, what are we gonna do? And I was just like holding her for a bit, like, this is really awkward. But yeah, and then we knew in that moment, I was like, I'd already told him we have to keep the area the same so I can birth the placenta.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, let's just try and keep that going. The birth is not finished yet. And then he went and to make a tea as well
Mm-hmm.
for me, which is a herbal tea for the placenta release, just in case I needed it. But then I sort of sat on the bed and I was just like, the umbilical cord is too short. Like I can hardly hold her, and he couldn't
Mm.
hold her. So we were like, no, we want to keep it. And then the placenta still wasn't birthing as well.
Right.
And then eventually we were sort of like, okay, we better cut this cord a lot earlier than I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we ended up cutting that. Yeah. I can't remember the timing, but it was, yeah, before my placenta had birthed.
Right.
And then we did that. We tied up the cord and just sort of he was holding, giving skin to skin with
Mm.
our daughter, and I was just like next to the bed, like waiting for the placenta to birth, and it just wasn't coming. And I was like squatting over this bowl, waiting, 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 and I was exhausted as well. And then I was like, no, I need to just rest.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like feeding the baby as well, but it was still not coming.
Mm-hmm.
I was having the herbal tea and still wasn't coming. And it was like we were in this kind of magical space, but yeah, it took hours for the placenta to be born, which was very exhausting. And then I was
Mm-hmm.
Googling it, not Googling, but there was a forum on Facebook, a group, Wild and Free Birth, which was a really helpful tool for me because
Mm-hmm.
when you Google these things, you're not going to find the information that you really need
Yeah.
because it's a lot more medicalized. But
Mm-hmm.
the forum that I was a part of, um, for Australian wild and wild pregnancy and free birth had, I was searching to see, how
Mm-hmm.
long it took some other women, and I was finding out that it was taking some women, it took, hours. So I was
Mm-hmm.
waiting, 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 trying to get the oxytocin going, and yeah, it was just not coming. And then my bladder was feeling really full after I think I had 2 cups of the herbal tea
Mm-hmm.
and some tincture, and my bladder was feeling really full, and went to the bathroom and I was trying to urinate or pee, and no wee was coming out, and I was like, what the hell? Like I'm busting to go to the toilet, but there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing coming out. And then I realized that my placenta was blocking that, or my bladder, and my
Okay.
bladder, or there was a my bladder was too full.
Mm-hmm.
But so this is after about 4 or 5 hours. Then I had to do a maneuver to empty my bladder, and then I contracted, and then I was like, oh, I think that's my placenta coming out. And then there was a bucket
Okay.
next to the toilet, and then
And then it came out.
then it came out. Yeah,
That must have been
it
so
was it wasn't
relieving.
yeah, it wasn't pretty. That it wasn't a romantic placenta release, which I was hoping
Mm.
to have. Yeah.
Mm. What maneuver did you do to actually help release your bladder?
So I was it was kind of instinctual, but I sort
Mm.
of was oh no, I think I read it somewhere as well.
Mm.
Was like to lean forward, and I was sort of pressing on my bladder
Mm.
from the outside and leaning forward, and then it was release. I could like it was literally releasing
Mm.
my bladder, which was so full.
Yeah.
And yeah, then I was like, wow, that's been blocking my placenta to come through. So that
Yeah.
I was drinking a lot in labor. So that was another thing that I thought maybe that's why my labor was taking so long too. Maybe my bladder was somewhere there blocking.
Right.
blocking
Okay.
the freedom. So
Mm-hmm.
that's an important thing that I hadn't really known, how important it is to go to the toilet as much as
Mm-hmm.
possible.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen that in births,
Yeah.
where yeah, women don't pee and then it's true, the bladder just gets so big that it will just block the space of where the baby is meant to
Hmm.
come through until it gets
Yeah.
released. So yeah,
Hmm. Yeah.
always pee in birth.
Exactly. Yeah. Really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So then what did you do with this placenta? Because you said that you had to cut it because the cord was so short, and then once your
Yeah.
placenta finally did release,
Hmm.
what did you do with it afterwards?
And then I think because I was so exhausted from being in labor for days and then it not coming out, I had it in a bowl,
Mm,
a ceramic bowl, and I knew that was important. And in Javanese culture as well, they consider the placenta to be like the brother or the sister
mm,
of the baby, and so you've got to sort of respect it with that same love and
mm,
care and reverence. But I feel like I got wrapped up in everything, and I was still high on the hormones that I'd almost sort of forgotten about the
mm,
placenta after it was put into the bowl, and was just so in awe of the baby. And then we were just
mm,
like, wow, the baby, the baby. But then the
mm,
placenta was just sort of sitting on the floor, being almost ignored in a way. And then my partner was like, you realize the placenta is still sitting in the bowl next to
mm.
the bed. And I was like, oh yeah, shit, I forgot. So
Mm.
um, I pulled out the placenta, and then I just sort of thought, okay. Originally we wanted to plant it because we live in an apartment. We don't have a yard or anything because we wanted to bury it. And then we were like wanted to put it in a plant, and we still haven't done that yet,
Okay.
unfortunately. Which is so like then since birth I've read, no, your birth process isn't over and you really shouldn't freeze the placenta. You should bury it straight away. And I in retrospect now, I wish I just buried it straight away. And we didn't get the big thing of soil that we wanted, because we wanted to bury it in a thing of soil and then put a
Mm.
tree over it.
Oh yeah.
And then when we get a home, we want to put that tree in the yard, or at least, always
Mm.
have that tree with us. But we haven't yet done it, and it's still in the freezer, which is always the plan. But we've been thinking of burying it somewhere rather than in the plant. But
Mm-hmm.
we really, yeah, I just sort of looked through it and after, and I got the excess blood that was with the placenta in the bowl, and I put that blood in a container, and I took it out to one of my plants, and I poured all the blood in and a few of the different plants and said some
Mm.
prayers with it and thanked it and everything, and just sort of checked it. I wasn't really sure what I was checking for though. I
Mm.
Now looking back, I wish that I did some more research
Mm-hmm.
on exactly what I was supposed to be checking for. Like I did know that I was, but when you're in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's not just a theory. It's like you've got to actually do
Mm-hmm.
it. And I was like, okay, this is the maternal side, this is the baby side. Like, are there any chunks missing or anything like that?
Mm-hmm.
Everything looked fine. Because with my first baby, they never told me that I had a ragged, because they'd pulled out the placenta so quickly.
Right.
I actually had a huge piece of placenta still stuck, retained placenta that was still stuck in me. I think it was a few
Mm.
weeks later that I started having all these cramps
Okay,
and
yeah.
everything. And then I pulled out this random piece of placenta like weeks
Mm-hmm.
later. So I
Wow.
knew that I had to check for that this time. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, and yeah, everything looked fine. And I thought, okay, that's because it wasn't rushed out this time.
Yeah, it had that
Yeah.
full timing to just shear off nicely and not just get,
Yeah.
yeah, ripped right out.
Yeah. Mm,
Oh, wow.
mm,
And then
yeah.
what was the rest of your postpartum journey like? Because you were saying that there was some Javanese traditions for pregnancy and birth.
Yeah.
So what were those for postpartum
So
time?
with postpartum, like a lot of cultures around the world, it's 30 to 40 days at home and not sort of being around other people or environment and everything. So I was in that space at home, but then I think it got to about 30 days and I was like, I need to leave the house. And then I had my aunties visiting from Indonesia and they came. And there's a ritual that happens around the 35th day of the baby's life and 35th day of postpartum called Selapanan,
Mm.
which is about final, like at 35 days, then because you've been resting and being sort of in confinement, then you can begin introducing the baby to the family. So
Mm.
the ritual is to welcome, and the ceremony is to welcome the baby to the family.
Aw.
So it just worked out in timing that all of my dad's sisters were visiting from Indonesia
Mm-hmm.
because my dad's been not well for the last few years. He's in a wheelchair now, so he can't
Mm.
travel.
Okay.
So they all came to Australia, and it just happened that it was exactly the time of this
Mm.
ritual, which is so funny because we always say about my daughter that, she's organizing it even before she was even
Yeah.
um, in my womb.
Yeah.
And so that ritual is where you have a special Javanese feast, and when you enter into the space, you go from the elders of the family, which is my father. He's the eldest in this um, area,
Mm.
and then you welcome, and then we do prayers over the baby to stop it from to protect it from outside
Mm.
um, you know, evil spirits or bad spirits. And
Mm-hmm.
we cut a bit of the hair off as well in the ritual. And every from the elders, you get prayers from the ancestors, and then
Mm.
we do that over the baby. So that was a really beautiful ceremony to have for my daughter, um,
Yeah, that sounds
to be a
so
part of.
lovely.
Yeah,
Oh,
it was very
wow.
beautiful. Mm,
Wow. Oh,
yeah.
sorry, just muted myself. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you as well about
Hmm.
your first birth with your first daughter and then this
Yep.
one that's just happened. How was your
Hmm.
breastfeeding relationships to those two babies? And did they differ between the first one and the
Hmm.
second, or were they similar?
Both of them were on the breast within the first half an hour to an hour.
Mm,
I'm pretty sure the first half an hour, like almost immediately, both of them were on the breast, and
mm,
both of them, it was just a very natural, it didn't feel Um, it just felt very intuitive or
mm-hmm,
instinctual.
mm-hmm,
And they both fed really well. Um, and I've not had any issues at all with breastfeeding. My
mm,
first daughter, I breastfed her until she was almost two.
yeah.
Especially because we traveled, I knew that I had to persevere as well because I was like, I'm not doing formula. Not that
Mm-hmm,
I really wanted to, but yeah, it was definitely not happening if we were backpacking as well.
yeah.
So yeah, she really liked being on the boob a lot more than my daughter now.
Okay.
She was a lot more, she was a lot more wanting it for not just the milk, but very much for the comfort and stuff. And
Mm.
I think perhaps that was because we moved locations quite often. So that
Oh,
was
yeah.
her sense of safety.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, that was until she was almost 2. And then my daughter now, she's still breastfed, and that's only breast milk at the moment. But
Mm-hmm.
she's very much very just a very different character, and
Mm-hmm.
she's very much wants the milk for necessity. Like no,
Okay. Yeah.
it's not sort of so much for comfort. Maybe because her environment is a lot more grounded.
Okay.
And she
Yeah.
just is like, okay, yeah, I need milk because for the food, I'll
Mm-hmm.
have that, and that's it. Thanks.
Oh, I love that.
So yeah. Hmm.
Wow, that's so
Yeah.
cute.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing those stories. Those are
Yeah.
so beautiful, and yeah, I just love hearing this experience that you went through with this second baby and all of the connections and everything that you learned. And yeah, just it's a really powerful story to share. So I'm really grateful that I was able to hear it from you and that it's able to be, as a gift, a story medicine for many women
Yeah.
that will be able to hear this at some point.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. And I think, yeah, it's really important because I was looking, that's how I found you, Freebirthing, your page,
Mm,
in color, because I there weren't a lot of stories that I would hear.
mm-hmm,
It was only very much white women that I would hear these stories from. And although I'm half white,
mm-hmm,
it was there was this other aspect that I was kind of searching for to find that common
mm-hmm.
factor or that relation or that I could relate to. And so when
Yeah.
I found yours, yeah, it was like, okay, this is really nice that you're creating this platform.
Mm.
Yeah, because it's yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, no, it's needed. It really is. Like you said, there
Mm,
a lot of the free birth space is centralized around white women, and if
yeah,
women of color do come into these spaces to share their stories, it's very, you know, it's a special episode, and it's like we're not
yeah,
special, we're women and we're people and we have these
exactly.
stories.
Yeah,
So I just want
mm,
to have that space where these women can come in and just
yeah,
freely share and to get our stories out there more.
yeah,
We need to be sharing and hearing women and seeing women of color birth in this way because, it's part of our ancestral history as well. So
mm,
yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm grateful that you were able to share and you could find a connection to this. And yeah,
beautiful.
it's just building a beautiful library of all of this. And I'm so, so happy that this has come to be and come into fruition. And it's women like you that keep it going. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's all a joint effort. Um, but before we leave, one last
Yeah.
thing or two last things.
Mm.
Is there anything else that you would like to share on your pregnancy, birth, postpartum experiences from your first or second daughter, or do you feel complete in that?
I think I've shared. Thank you for giving me the space to share as well,
Mm,
because in this world, birth, I've realized, and so same as my partner, that birth is not just in general, it's just something that is not really deeply respected in the modern Western world, especially.
mm-hmm,
It's just sort of pushed to the side, and everyone's like, "Yeah, oh, how's the baby?" Yeah, but no one really cares any deeper.
mm-hmm,
Even on yeah, so it's really beautiful to be in that space where someone cares, and to to give more respect and reverence to birth, because it's such
mm-hmm,
an essential part of the future as well, and the past. And if we're
mm-hmm,
doing having these conversations as well, and women giving deep respect to these conversations and these processes, it
mm-hmm,
creates a new perspective, and of this, the importance of this, because the way we are birthing our babies is
mm-hmm,
going to have a huge impact on the next generation and how they come
mm-hmm.
into this world. So yeah,
Yep.
it's so important, and I wish now, especially after having this baby, I wish to bring more light to how to, just even if you're not in the birth space, or you're not having a baby, or you're not giving birth, or you don't know anyone that's giving birth, how important it is to still respect these processes for
Mm-hmm.
humanity and
Mm-hmm.
everything. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's one thing that's definitely popped up for me and my partner, that we've
Mm-hmm.
noticed how much it's no one really cares.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. And like the only way that we're going to see great change in this world for the
Mm,
future is if we change it at birth. That's the pivotal
yeah,
moment, you know? It's
exactly.
that has to change with women, with mothers, with how these babies are being brought into this world.
Mm,
And these children know how they want to be born. They know the mothers that they want to come into. They know,
yeah.
you know, when you're listening, you're tapping in. These babies will
Mm,
tell you, give you the blueprint like yours did to change your
yeah,
whole life up because your baby knew exactly what they needed on their journey to come into this physical world. So,
exactly.
yeah, we just have to sit and listen and
Yeah,
we will be divinely guided.
exactly. Yeah.
Um, one more thing, Amalia, before I let you
Hmm.
go. If
Yep.
any woman wanted to reach out to you to speak to you a little bit deeper on your stories,
Hmm.
would you like to share how they could do that?
Yeah. So on Instagram, you can reach me at charisma_ra, which is KHARISMA _ra, which is my middle name, Charisma.
Mm,
And yeah, you can. I'm usually a counselor, holistic counselor. So,
mm,
but I'm still on maternity leave, and I also make jewellery too. But you can, yeah, you can catch me on Instagram, or yeah, that's really the only place, or email, which you can find my details on through my email. But through my website, which is charisma-ra.com. And that's got everything that I do. And I do hope to, well, I do plan, not hope to offer,
mm,
especially a new offering for women birthing and pregnancy, and looking at the holistic aspects of birth, of the whole birth continuum,
mm,
and pregnancy. And I do see myself doing postpartum um, care too, when the time comes, but
mm,
still very much deep in motherhood right now that
mm-hmm,
I can't really pivot too much away from. But yeah,
mm.
that's how to find me.
Amazing. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Amalia. This has
Thank you
been
so
such a
much,
beautiful
Carmen.
conversation. Thank you so much, women, for listening to this latest episode of the Freebirthing in Color movement. If you want to continue supporting this movement and all that comes with it, please give a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Like the videos on YouTube and share this episode with some of your friends. As reciprocity for the work that I'm doing and the content that I'm creating, it only takes 2 minutes to show your support through a 5-star rating, a small written review, and a share. If you want to give a monetary donation to help with the back end costs of keeping everything that is happening within this movement going, you can send your donations through PayPal via the link in the show notes. And again, as reciprocity for the work that I'm doing and creating, I'm so grateful when those donations come through. I have many other avenues of work that I've created, such as Portals of Wisdom, which are educational guidebooks for women to reclaim and remember their personal bodily sovereignty. I have one-to-one activation sessions and one-to-one or group mentorship opportunities, as well as an amazing course called Cyclical Woman that is a deep dive into the natural cycles of Mother Earth and connecting into your internal rhythms in relation to where Mother Earth is at any given moment. And lastly, I want to mention again the Freebirthing in Color community. It is open for enrollment, so please, if you want to create a deeper sense of connection to myself and other women navigating the same phase of life that you're in, please, please, please come and join us, and let's create something truly beautiful in there. All information can be found within the show notes below, or you can go to primalwomanportal.com and you'll find everything that you need. I'll see you in the next episode.